Nobody warns you about the middle. They tell you to start investing early and they show you the compound interest charts with the satisfying curves bending upward and they talk about millionaires and retirement and financial freedom and it all sounds like a journey with a clear arc. You start, you stay consistent, you arrive. What they do not tell you about is the long, brutal middle section where none of that feels remotely true. Where you have been doing this for years, contributing every month, not touching it, doing everything right, and your balance goes from 40,000 to 43,000 to 41,000 after a bad week to 46,000 3 months later, and you are sitting there doing the math in your head thinking that at this rate you will be 90 years old before any of this actually means anything. It feels like walking on a treadmill that is moving slightly slower than your feet. You are doing the motion. You are putting in the effort, but the ground underneath you is barely moving. That feeling is one of the most financially dangerous places a person can be, not because you are doing anything wrong, but because that specific kind of invisible progress is where most people quietly give up. They do not make a dramatic decision. They just slowly stop contributing as consistently. They start thinking maybe this is not working for me the way it works for other people, and they step off the treadmill right before the terrain was about to change entirely. Because there is a number, a specific threshold that almost nobody in personal finance talks about with the seriousness it deserves, and crossing it does not just change your balance, it changes the entire physics of your financial life. That number is $500,000. And today, I'm going to show you exactly what happens when you get there, and why everything you believed about investing up to that point needs to fundamentally shift. If this is your first time here, subscribe right now because this is what we do on this channel every week. We get into the mechanics and the psychology of building real wealth, not the motivational poster version, the actual version. I'm David Marshall and I am obsessed with the moments in a financial journey where the rules change and most people do not realize it. This is one of those moments. Stay with me. Let us start with the math because the math here is genuinely shocking once you see it clearly. And I think most people have never actually seen it laid out in a way that lands. So here is the comparison I want you to hold in your mind. You are investing consistently. Let us say you are contributing around $24,000 a year, which is $2,000 a month, a serious investor doing serious things. At $100,000 in your portfolio, assuming a 10% average annual return, the market contributes roughly $10,000 to your balance that year. You contribute $24,000. You are the engine. Your contributions are doing more than twice the work that the market is doing. You are essentially still in the grind phase, still largely dependent on your own consistent behavior to move the needle. The market is helping, but you are carrying most of the weight. Now watch what happens at $500,000. Same 10% average return. The market contributes $50,000 to your balance that year. You are still contributing your $24,000, but now the market is contributing more than twice what you are. The ratio has completely flipped. You went from being the engine to being a passenger on something much more powerful than you. Your job used to be to push. Now your job is to not get in the way. That is not a small shift. That is a complete inversion of how wealth building works for you, and it happens not gradually but at a specific threshold. $500,000 is the point where compound interest stops being a concept you read about and starts being a force you can actually feel working in your life. And then there is the time compression piece that most people never think about until they are living it, and it stops them in their tracks. The journey from $0 to $500,000, doing everything right, contributing consistently, is one of the longest, most psychologically demanding stretches of the entire wealth-building process. It takes most disciplined investors somewhere between 15 and 25 years depending on income and market conditions. And then here is the part that genuinely does not feel real until you see it happen. The next 500,000, going from 500,000 to $1 million, takes dramatically less time. Not because you changed anything you are doing, but because the math is working at a completely different scale now. And the double after that comes faster still. The journey from 0 to 500,000 is longer than the next 3 doublings combined. You spent decades fighting for something that the math will now do for you over and over again with decreasing time between each milestone. The treadmill you were on for all those years was not broken, it was loading. And at $500,000 it finishes loading. But now I need to tell you about the part that catches almost everyone off guard, because crossing 500,000 is not just a mathematical event, it is a psychological one, and the psychological challenge that comes with it is one that most financial content completely ignores. Here is the reality. A 10% market correction on a $500,000 portfolio is a $50,000 drop. In a week, maybe in a few days, $50,000 is a full year of salary for a significant portion of Americans. It is money that took you years to accumulate, showing up on a screen as a loss in a time frame so short it feels violent. And your brain, which spent years learning to treat your portfolio balance as an abstraction, a number you checked periodically but did not feel viscerally, is suddenly not able to maintain that distance anymore. Because $50,000 does not feel abstract. It feels like something real just got taken from you. I call this the gut punch problem. And it is the specific reason why people who have done everything right for 20 years make catastrophically bad decisions right at the moment when patience would pay them the most. They hit 500,000. The market drops 10 or 15%, and for the first time the dollar amount of the loss is large enough to override the rational understanding that corrections are normal and temporary. They sell, they lock in the loss. They step off the treadmill at the exact moment when they had finally accumulated enough for the math to do the heavy lifting. And that decision, made in a few panicked days, can set them back years. So I want you to do something right now, before you have $500,000 if you are not there yet, or as a gut check if you already are. I want you to look at your current portfolio balance and do a simple calculation. What is 30% of that number, not 10%, 30? Because in a real sustained downturn in a 2008-style event, that is the territory we are talking about. That is not a theoretical number. That is a number your portfolio has a real historical chance of showing you at some point in a long investing lifetime. And I want you to sit with that number, not to scare you, but to ask yourself honestly whether you are emotionally prepared to look at that loss on a screen and not act on it. Because the investors who survive and thrive through major corrections are not the ones with the best market timing. They are the ones who prepared psychologically for the gut punch before it arrived so that when it did they were able to stay in their seat. Now here is the shift in behavior that $500,000 demands from you. And this is the piece I really want you to lock in because it is counterintuitive and it is where a lot of people get stuck even when the math starts working in their favor. For most of your early investing life, the personal finance conversation is about spending habits. Cut the subscriptions, skip the daily coffee, bring lunch from home, automate the savings. And that framing is completely appropriate when your contributions are doing more work than your returns, when you are the engine, when changing your behavior by a few $100s a month actually moves the needle meaningfully. But at $500,000, that conversation has to change, not because the frugality was wrong, but because the leverage has shifted. At $500,000, you need to stop agonizing over $6 coffees and start obsessing over fund fees. Because a 1% annual expense ratio on a $500,000 portfolio costs you $5,000 a year. Every year, not once, every year. And it compounds against you the same way returns compound for you. A fee difference of 0.5% over 20 years on a growing portfolio at this level costs you more money than you would ever save by skipping coffee for a decade. The math of small percentages at large numbers dwarfs the math of small dollar amounts in daily life. This is the shift. This is where the identity of saver has to start becoming the identity of investor, because a saver optimizes behavior, an investor optimizes structure. And at $500,000, structure is doing more work than behavior ever could. This means looking hard at every fund in your portfolio and understanding what it costs you. It means making sure your asset allocation is actually aligned with your timeline and your real risk tolerance, and not just what you set up 10 years ago and never revisited. It means thinking about tax efficiency, which accounts hold which assets, whether you are unnecessarily paying taxes on gains you could be deferring. These are not complicated things, but they require a different kind of attention than the question of whether to buy lunch. And most people never make this mental transition because nobody ever tells them that the rules of the game have changed. Let me bring this together because I want you to leave with something that actually shifts how you see your journey today. The long, brutal middle that feels like a treadmill going nowhere is not evidence that this is not working. It is the loading phase. It is the accumulation of potential energy that the math will eventually release all at once. $500,000 is where the physics change, where the market starts contributing more than you do, where the next milestones come faster than any that came before, where the story of your wealth stops being about your discipline and starts being about your patience. But getting there and staying there requires two things most people are not prepared for: the psychological readiness to tolerate the gut punch of large dollar losses without making permanent decisions based on temporary conditions, and the identity shift from someone who saves money to someone who manages structure, fees, allocation, and tax efficiency at a level where those decisions have real material consequences. The middle is hard. The math of early stage investing is genuinely humbling and slow, and it asks you to trust a process whose payoff is invisible for years. But the other side of that middle is a place where the rules of money start working for you in a way they never did before. Where you wake up on a random Wednesday and the market contributed more to your net worth while you slept than you earned at work. Where time starts compressing. Where the oxygen in the room changes. This is not about yachts. It is not about showing anyone anything. It is about reaching the threshold where money stops being the thing you chase and starts being the thing that works for you while you get to actually live. $500,000 is that threshold. And if you are in the brutal middle right now, I need you to hear this clearly. You are not behind, you are loading. Subscribe to David Marshall Finance right now if this gave you a new way of seeing where you are in this journey, because every single week on this channel we talk about the moments where the financial rules change and most people miss it. Like this video if it landed, and drop a comment below telling me where you are right now. Early stage, deep in the middle, or on the other side of it. I want to know. I will see you in the next one.